I would like to appreciate everyone for spending your time listening to me. Most of my friends asked me to make a persuade about Joseph Stalin, the president of the Soviet Union. So I'm here for you and I have your answer. This is Murwanashyaka Siriyac channel. You are welcome. Joseph Stalin was born on December 18th in 1978 in Georgia, Russian Empire, and he was died in March 5th, 1953 in Moscow, in Russia. He was the Secretary General of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union from 1922 up to 1953, and the Premier of the Soviet State from 1941 up to 1953, who for a quarter of a century dictatorially ruled the Soviet Union and transformed it into a major world power. During the quarter of a century preceding his death, the Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin probably exercised greater political power than any other figure in history. Stalin industrialized the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, forcibly collectivized its agriculture, consolidated his position by intensive police terror, helped to defeat Germany in 1941 up to 1945, and extended Soviet control to include the belt of Eastern European states, chief architect of Soviet totalitarianism and a skilled but phenomenally ruthless organizer. He destroyed the remnants of individual freedom and failed to promote individual prosperity. Yet he created a mighty military-industrial complex and led to the Soviet Union in the nuclear age. Stalin's biography was long, obscured by a mendacious Soviet-propagated legend exaggerating his prowess as a heroic Bolshevik boy, conspiration, and fight forward of Lenin, the founder of the Soviet Union. In his prime, Stalin was hailed as a universal genius of a shining sun or the staff of life, and also as a great teacher of a friend, especially of those communities he most severely persecuted. Once he was even publicly invoked as our father by a metropolitan of the Russian Orthodox Church. Achieving wide visual promotion through bursts, statues, and icon of himself, the dictator became the object of a fanatical cult that in private he probably regarded with cynicism. Stalin was of a Georgian, not Russian origin, and persistent rumors claim that he was Ossetian of the paternal side. He was the son of a power cobra in the provincial Georgian town of Gori in the Caucasus, then an imperial Russian colony. The drunken father savagely beat his son. Speaking only Georgian at home, Joseph learned Russia, which he always spoke with a guttural Georgian accent. While attending the church school at Gori in 1888 up to 1994, he then moved to the Tiflis Theological Seminary, where he secretly read Karl Marx, the fifth theoretician of international communism, and other forbidden texts being expelled in 1899 for revolutionary activity according to the legend, or leaving because of ill health according to his doting mother. The mother, a devout washerwoman, had dreamed of her son becoming a priest, but Joseph Jugashvili was more ruffianly than clerical in appearance and outlook. He was short, stocky, black-haired, fierce-eyed, with one arm longer than the another. This swarthy face, scared by smallpox, contracted in infants, physically strong and endowed with prodigious willpower. He learned to disguise his true feelings and to bide his time in accordance with the Caucasian blood-feud tradition. He was impressible in plotting long-term revenge against those who offended him. In December 1899, Jugashvili became briefly a clerk in the Tiflis Observatory, the only paid employment that is recorded as having taken outside politics. There is no record of his ever having done manual labor. In 19, he joined the political underground, fomenting labor demonstrations and strikes in the main industrial center of the Caucasus. But his excessive zeal is pushing deputy workers into bloody clashes with the police, antagonized his fellow conspirators. After the Social Democrats, Marxist revolutionaries of the Russian Empire had split into their two competing wings, Menshevik and Bolshevik. In 1903, Jugashvili joined the second, more militant of those factions and became a disciple of its leader Lenin. Between April 1902 and March 1913, Jugashvili was 7 times arrested for revolutionary activity, undergoing repeated imprisonment of exile. The mildness of the sentence and the ease with which the young conspirator effected his frequent escapes lend color to the unproved speculation that Jugashvili was for a time an agent provocateur in pay of the imperial political police. Stalin's rise to power. Jugashvili made a slow progress in the party hierarchy. He attended 3 policy-making conclaves of the Russian Social Democrats in Temerfors, Stockholm, and London without making much impression, but he was active behind the scene, helping to plot a spectacular hold-up in Tiflis on June 25, 1907, in order to expropriate funds for the party. His first big political promotion came in February 1912, when Lenin, now in emigration, co-opted with him to serve on the first Central Committee of the Bolshevik Party, which had finally broke with the other Social Democrats. In the following year, Jugashvili published at Lenin's behest an important article on Marxism and the national question. By now, he had adopted the name Stalin, deriving from Russia, star or steer in English. He also briefly edited the newly founded Bolshevik newspaper Pravda before undergoing his longest period of exile in Siberia from July 1913 to March 1917. In about 1994, Stalin had married a pure Georgian girl, Ekaterina Sivadins. She died some 3 years later and left a son, Jacob, whom his father treated with contempt, calling him a weakling after an unsuccessful suicide attempt in the late 1920. When Jacob was taken prisoner by the Germans during World War II, Stalin refused a German offer to exchange his son. Reaching Petrograd from Siberia on March 25, 1917, Stalin resumed editorship of Pravda. He briefly advocated Bolshevik cooperation with the provisional government of middle-class liberals and had succeeded to easy power on the last Tsar's abdication during the February Revolution. But under Lenin's influence, Stalin's son switched to the more militant policy of armed seizure of power by the Bolsheviks. When the coup d'etat occurred in November 1917, he played an important role, but one less prominent than that of his chief rival, Leon Trotsky. Active as a political military leader on various fronts during the Civil War of 1918, 1918 up to 20, Stalin also held two ministerial posts in the new Bolshevik government, being Commissar for Nationality in 1917 up to 23, and for state control or workers and peasant inspection in 1919 up to 23. But it was his position as a Secretary General of the Paris Central Committee from 1922 until his death that provided the power base for his dictatorship. Besides heading the Secretariat, he was also member of the powerful Politburo and of many other interlocking and overlapping committees. An arch-bureaucrat engaged in quietly outmaneuvering brilliant rivals, including Trotsky and Grigory Zinoviev, who despised such mundane organization work. Because the pockmarked Georgian was so obviously unintellectual, they thought him unintelligent, a gross error, and one literally fatal in their case. From 1921 onwards, Stalin floated the ailing Lenina's wishes until a year before his death. Lenin wrote a political testament since widely publicized calling for Stalin's removal from the Secretary Generalship from Lenin. This document was potentially ruinous to Stalin's career, but his usual luck and skill enabled him to have it discounted during his lifetime. Let us talk about Lenin's successor. After Lenin's death in January 1924, Stalin promoted an extravagant quasi-Byzantine cult of the deceased leader. Archpriest of Leninism, Stalin also promoted his own cult in the following year by having the city of Tsaritsyn renamed Stalingrad. Now it is called Volgograd. His main rival, Trotsky, was now in eclipse, having been ousted by the ruling triumvirate of Zinoviev, Lev Kamenev, and Stalin. Soon afterward, Stalin joined with the rightist leaders Nikolai Bukharin and Alexei Rykov in an alliance directed against his former co-triumvirs, pinning his faith in the ability of the Soviet Union to establish a viable political system without waiting for the support hitherto expected from worldwide revolution. The Secretary General advocated a policy of socialism in one country. This was popular with hard-headed party managers whom he was promoting to influential positions in the middle hierarchy. His most powerful rivals were all dismissed: Bukharin and Rykov, son throwing Zinoviev and Kamenev into disgrace and political limbo pending execution. Stalin expelled Trotsky from the Soviet Union in 1929 and had him assassinated in Mexico in 1940. In 1928, Stalin abandoned Lenin's quasi-capitalist new economic policy in favor of headlong state-organized industrialization under a succession of 5 years plans. This was in effect of a new Russian Revolution, more devastating in its effect than those of 1917. The dictators brought fear most heavily on the peasantry, some 25 million rustic households being compared to amalgamate in collective or state forms within a few years. Resisting desperately, the reluctant masses were attacked by troops and OGPU political police units and cooperative peasant termed kulaks. were arrested en masse and shot, exiled, or absorbed into the rapidly expanding network of Stalinist concentration camps and worked to death under atrocious conditions. Collectivization caused a great famine in Ukraine, and Stalin's policies, some of which targeted Ukrainians specifically, compounded the death and misery. Stalin continued to export the grain stock that a less cruel leader would have rushed to the famine-stricken areas in Ukraine. This famine came to be known as the Holodomor, from the Ukrainian words for hunger and examination. Some 10 million peasants may have perished through Stalin's policy during these years. Crash industrialization was less disastrous in its effects, but it too numbered in grandiose failures, to which Stalin responded by arraigning industrial managers in a succession of show trials. Intimidated into confessing imaginary crimes, the accused served as a self-denounced scapegoats for catastrophes arising from the secretary general's policies, Yet, Stalin was successful in rapidly industrializing a backward country, as was widely acknowledged by enthusiastic contemporary foreign witnesses, including Adolf Hitler and such well-known writers as H.G. Wells and George Bernard Shaw. Among those who vainly sought to moderate Stalin's policy was his young second wife, Nadezhda Alieva, whom he had married in 1919 and who committed suicide in 1932. They had two children. The son, Vasily, perished as an alcoholic after rising to unmerited high rank in the Soviet Air Force. The daughter, Svetlana, became the object for her father's alternating affection and bad temper. She emigrated after his death and later wrote memoirs that illuminate Stalin's well-camouflaged private life. The Great Purges. In late 1934, just when the worst excess of Stalinism seemed to have spent themselves, the Secretary General launched a new campaign of political terror against the very Communist Party members who had brought him to power. His pretext was the assassination in Leningrad on December 1st of his leading courage and potential rival Sergei Kirov. That Stalin himself had arranged Kirov's murder as an excuse for the promotion of mass bloodshed was strongly hinted by Nikita Khrushchev, first secretary of the party, in a speech denouncing Stalin at the 20th Party Congress in 1956. Stalin used the show trial of leading communists as a means of expanding the new terror. In August 1936, Zinoviev and Kamenev were paraded in court to repeat fabricated confession, sentenced to death and shot. Two more major trials followed in January 1937 and March 1938. In June 1937, Marshal Mikhail Tukhachevsky, at the time the most influential military personality, and other leading generals were reported to a court, martyred on charge of treason and executed. Such were the main publicly acknowledged persecution that empowered Stalin to tame the Soviet Communist Party and the Soviet elite as a war. He not only liquidated veteran semi-independent Bolsheviks, but also many party bosses, military leaders, industrial managers, and high government officials totally subservient to himself. And the victims include foreign communists on Soviet territory and members of the very political police organization now called the NKVD, or other sections of the Soviet elite, the arts, the academic world, the legal and the diplomatic professions also lost of high proportion of victims and did the population at large to a semi-haphazard, galloping persecution that feed on exalted denunciations and confessions. This implicated even more victims until Stalin himself reduced the terror, though he never abandoned it. Stalin's political victims were numbered in terms of millions. His main motive was presumably to maximize his personal power. Let's talk about role in World War II of Joseph Stalin. During World War II, Stalin emerged after an unpromising start as the most successful of the Supreme leaders thrown up by the belligerent nations. In August 1939, after first attempting to form an anti-Hitler alliance with the Western powers, he concluded a pact with Hitler which encouraged the German dictator to attack Poland and begin World War II, anxious to strengthen his western frontiers while his new but republic, treacherous German ally, was still engaged in the West. Stalin annexed eastern Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and parts of Romania. He also attacked Finland and extorted the territory's concessions. In May 1941, Stalin recognized that growing danger of German attack on the Soviet Union by appointing himself chairman of the Council of People's Commissars, head of the government. It was his first governmental office since 1923. Stalin's pre-war defensive measures were exposed as incompetent by the German blitzkrieg that surged deep into Soviet territory after Hitler's unprovoked attack on the Soviet Union on June 22, 1941. Khrushchev claimed that Stalin was shocked into temporary inactivity by the onslaught, but if so, he soon rallied and appointed himself Supreme Commander-in-Chief. When the Germans menaced Moscow in the winter of 1941, he remained in the threatened capital, helping to organize a great counter-offensive. The Battle of Stalingrad in the following winter and the Battle of Kursk in the summer of 1943 were also won by the Soviet army under Stalin's supreme direction, turning the tide of invasion against the retreating Germans, who capitulated in May 1945. As war leader, Stalin maintained close personal control over the Soviet battlefronts, military reserves, and war economy, at first over inclined to intervene with inept telefront instructions, and Hitler did. The Soviet generalism gradually learned to delegate military decisions. Stalin participated in high-level Allied meetings, including those of Big Three with Churchill and Roosevelt and Tehran, Yalta in 1945 and Potsdam 1945. A formidable negotiator, he outwitted these foreign statesmen. His superior skill has been acclaimed by Anthony Eden, then British Foreign Secretary. Let us see his last years. After the war, Stalin imposed on Eastern Europe a new kind of colonial control based on native communist regime nominally independent but in fact subservient to himself. He thus increased the number of his subjects by about 100 million. But in 1948, the defection of terrorist Yugoslavia from the Soviet camp struck a severe blow toward communism as a Stalin-dominated minority. To prevent other client states from following Tito's example, Stalin instigated local show trials manipulated like those of Great Purge of the 1930 in Russia, in which satellite communist leaders confessed to Titoism, many being executed. Far from continuing his wartime alliance with the United States and Great Britain, Stalin now regarded those countries, and especially the United States, as the arch enemies that he needed after Hitler's death. At home, the primacy of Marxist ideology was harshly reasserted. Stalin's chief ideological Hatchman Andrew Zdanov, a secretary of the Central Committee, began a reign of terror in the Soviet artistic and intellectual world. Foreign achievements were derided, and the primacy of Russian as inventors and pioneers in practically every field was asserted. Hopes for domestic relaxation widely aroused in the Soviet Union during the war were thus sadly disappointed. Increasingly suspicious and paranoid in his later years, Stalin ordered the arrest announced in January 1953 of certain mostly Jewish Kremlin doctor on charge of medical murdering various Soviet leaders, including Zdanov. The dictator was evidently preparing to make this doctor plot the pretext for yet another great terror, menacing all his senior associates, but he died suddenly on March 5, according to the official report. So convenient was this death to his entourage that suspicions of foul play were voiced. Let us talk about the legacy of Joseph Stalin. A politician to the marrow of his bones, Stalin had little private or family life, finding his main relaxation in impromptu birthday suppers to which he would invite high party officials, generals, visiting foreign potentates, and the like, drinking little himself. On these occasions, the dictator would encourage excessive indulgence in other, thus revealing weak points that he could exploit. He would also tease his guests, jocularity and malice, being nicely balanced in his manner. For such brief banter, Stalin's main henchman, Vyacheslav Molotov, the stuttering foreign minister, was often a target. Stalin had a keen, ironical sense of humor, usually devoted to deflating his guests rather than to amusing them. Foremost among Stalin's accomplishments was the industrialization of a country which, when he assumed complete control in 1928, was still notably backward by comparison with the leading industrial nations of the world. By 1937, after less than a decade's rule as a totalitarian dictator, he had increased the Soviet Union's total industrial output to the point where it was surpassed only by that of the United States. The extent of this achievement may best be appreciated if one remembers that Russia had held only 15th place for overall industrial output in 1913, and that it thereafter suffered many years of even greater devastation through World War, Civil War, famine, and pestilence than afflicted any of the world's industrial countries during the same period. Yet more apparently revered during World War II, the Soviet Union was nevertheless able, under Stalin's leadership, to play a major part in defeating Hitler while maintaining its position as the world's second most powerful industrial and now military complex after the United States. In 1949, Stalinist Russia signaled its arrival as the world's second nuclear power by exploding an atomic bomb. Against these formidable achievements must be set one major disadvantage. Though a high industrial output was indeed achieved under Stalin, very little of it ever became available to the ordinary Soviet citizens in the form of consumer goods or amenities of life. A considerable proportion of the national wealth, a proportion war unparalleled in the history of any peacetime capitalist country, was appropriated by the state of cover military expenditure, the police apparatus, and further industrialization. It is also arguable that a comparable degree of industrialization would have come about in any case, and surely by means less severe, under almost an unsuccessful regime that might have evolved as alternative to Stalinism. Stalin's collectivization of agriculture did not produce positive economic results remotely comparable to those attained by Soviet industry. Considered as a means of asserting control over the politically recalcitrant peasantry, however, collectivization justified itself and continued to do so for decades, remaining one of the dictator's most durable achievements. Moreover, the process of intensive urbanization, as instituted by Stalin, continued after his death in what still remained as population more predominantly rural than that of any other major industry country. In 1937, up to 56% of the population was recorded as engaged in agriculture or forestry. By 1958, that proportion had dropped to 42%, very largely as a result of Stalin's policy. Another of the dictator's achievements was the creation of his elaborately bureaucratized administrative machinery based on the interlinking of the Communist Party ministries, legislative bodies, trade union, political police, and armed forces, and also on a host of other machine control devices. During the decade following the dictator's death, these continued to supply the essential management levers of Soviet society, often remaining under the control of individuals who had risen to prominence during the years of the Stalinist terror. But the element of total personal dictatorship did not survive Stalin in its most extreme form. One result of his death was the resurgence of the Communist Party as the primary center of power, after years during which that organization, along with all other Soviet institutions, had been subordinated to a single man's whim. Yet, despite the great power wielded by Stalin's successors as party leaders, they became no more than dominant figures within the framework of a ruling oligarchy. They did not develop into potentates responsible to themselves alone, such as Stalin was during his era of centuries, virtually unchallenged rule. Stalin has arguably made a greater impact of the lives of more individuals than any other figure in history, but the evaluation of his overall achievement still remains decades after his death a highly controversial. Historians have not yet reached any definitive consensus on the worth of his accomplishment, and it is unlikely that they ever will. To the American scholar George F. Kennan, Stalin is a great man, but one great in his incredible criminality, a criminality effectively without limits, while Robert C. Tucker, an American specialist on Soviet affairs, has described Stalin as a 20th century Ivan the Terrible. To the British historian E. H. Carr, the Georgian dictator appears as a ruthless, vigorous figure, but one lacking in originality, a comparative nonentity thrust into greatness by the inexorable march of the Great Revolution that he found himself leading. We really thank you for spending your time listening to our persuade about Joseph Stalin's biography. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. This is Chano mu Rwanda Shyaka Siriyake. See you next time.